Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm reviewing Bomb Busters, a bomb defusing game for 2 to 5 players. And no disclaimer for this one, I bought a copy myself. In Bomb Busters, the players are trying to defuse bombs using different equipment. Each player has one or more stands of wires like these, numbered 1 through 12, and they're trying to find pairs with other players. So somebody else is going to point at me and say, hey, is this a 6? And if it is, I put mine down and they put theirs down, and we're trying to defuse all the wires that way, playing through a total of 66 scenarios that add more and more crazy new rules and components as you unlock the boxes. And you need to do all of that before you make too many mistakes or cut a dangerous red wire. And if you do, you win the game. So let's talk about 5 key things to know about Bomb Busters. So for my number 5 point, which is a pro, I'm looking at the equipment cards in the game. So in each game, you get a random number of equipment equal to the number of players. And this is from a pretty big deck to begin with, but you get even more as you unlock the boxes. And the variety of equipment game to game is great. The powers are quite useful, and any player can use them at any time generally, so there's some cooperation in kind of discussing who should get it. You also don't unlock them until you snip a wire of a certain number, so trying to make that happen earlier becomes part of the strategy of the game. And then players have some of their own personal equipment, and this also changes through the course of the campaign, that will let them do even more things. So yeah, just like the mitigation and kind of variety of the options and powers on offer here. My number 4 point is more of a mix, and that's focused on the player count and randomness in the game. So first, talking about randomness, because you distribute the tiles equally between all the players, you're going to get random mixes, and sometimes you'll get like a ton of one number in one person's hand. In fact, if they have every one of the numbers, all 4, they can cut it immediately on their own. Or you'll get weird distributions where like one person has almost all their tiles at 10 or less, so it becomes really easy to kind of narrow down what they might have. So that's part of the game, and it is very quick playing, so even when you get sort of weird shuffles, it's not a big deal, but the game can swing easier or harder just based on how these things fall out, and that's especially true in lower player counts, especially 2-player, because in 2-player, each player has 2 stands, but because you see half the wires and know exactly where the other half the wires are, and you tend to have more for you to get those easy cuts earlier, I do find 2-player works well, but is slightly less satisfying than higher player counts. For my number 3 point, I'm looking at the clues and signaling and kind of the cooperation in the game, and this is a pro for my taste as well. So this is one of those games where you can't talk about the game at all. You can't like discuss where you're going to cut and everything. But different actions and items and things, and even at the beginning of the game, will let you put down little clues about what wires are where. And then on each player's turn, they're cutting one wire, one number that they also hold, and even like which one you choose to reveal when you cut a wire. There's just lots of ways to kind of work around the communication. When you get deeper in the game and into the more challenging scenarios, you can kind of think, oh, well, if they could see this, and they would do that, so they must not be able to see this. You know, all that kind of yummy stuff you see in other cooperative deduction games. I think it works great here, and even with the limited communication, you do feel like you're really working together and trying to communicate with each other as well as you can. For my number 2 point, I'm looking at the scenarios in the game, and like I said, there are 66 of them, each with a big card like this. The first 8 are just really tutorials that slowly get you ready to play the game, but then you start unlocking these boxes, and you'll see they're chunky things. They not only have the new scenario cards, but new cards and like new tiles and just lots of things that change up the play of the game. And this is overall a big pro for my taste because it is really exciting and fun to open up a new box to unlock new stuff. We're through the first 2 of them and are about to start the 3rd. And the scenarios do find fun ways to vary up the difficulty and the way you play. They even add more challenge for 2 players to balance out some of the luck I talked about. But the one big caveat you need to be aware of is that each box, each new set has 10 or 11 more missions in it, and not all of them are like exciting and adding new things. You'll see missions that are like, hey, do the exact same thing you did before, but add a timer this time. That's exciting. So not every mission is highly different. Not every mission is exciting. I'll compare it a lot to The Crew and The Crew Deep Sea, where like, yes, you're going through more and more missions, but it's not always like more difficult or more interesting. Clearly, that's not a big deal when there are 66 missions and all of them are replayable. These are not things where like you do it once and it's done. But it's also not like every mission is super exciting. And honestly, we've just skipped some. We've been like, yeah, we've seen a mission like that before. Let's just play the next one. But the biggest point I got to focus on, my number 1, is the actual cutting of the wires and the tension in those actions. And this is just great, a full pro for my taste, because you are getting little drips of information, okay? You know where some numbers are. You know which numbers are not available anymore. You can see like the gaps in other people's boards as you're looking around. And all of that gives you some things you can figure out, some shortcuts, but a lot of times you're taking a 50-50 chance, or you're deciding, should I use this equipment now or later? And especially as the scenarios get more intense, as the information that's getting communicated is more complicated or more limited, there are just really neat things going on in the play of the game. And every little mistake you make, every time you call the wrong wire, it does tell you what the actual wire is, so it's not like a full loss. But as you're ticking toward that explosion of the bomb, it's just great. We really sweat sometimes playing this. So overall, you might want to check out Bomb Busters if you like tense, deductive, cooperative games. Things like Paint the Roses or Hanabi, I think, come to mind. Or I think if you're a fan of The Crew, you might also enjoy this one because the scenario system feels kind of similar. But on the other hand, if the core action of the game, cutting the wires, doesn't seem that interesting to you, I might avoid this because that is basically what you're doing despite the scenarios. And also if you're going to be playing the game primarily 2-player because it's not the best player count, although it does still work. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.